Russia and China are going to do is put all the influence they can possibly bring to bear on this situation to encourage the United States not to go to war in Iran. And this includes doing that which is necessary to create the conditions between Iran, Europe, and the United States that reduce this level of suspicion. Russia's done the world a great service in agreeing to bring in the low-enriched uranium stockpile of Iran and enrich it using Russian facilities up to the higher level of enrichment needed for this U.S.-built research reactor that's in Iran right now. They need to take their enrichment from 3.5%, which is what Iran's current centrifuge arrangement is optimized for, to 19.5%. Iran doesn't want to go to 19.5 because it would require an absolute reconfiguration of its centrifuge system. And it would create suspicion that they want to enrich even higher. Iran's made it clear, we only want low-enriched uranium for fuel. Russia's done it for fuel. Russia's done a great service by saying, we'll take care of this. And they've lowered the level of tension. And I think Russia and China will continue to behave in this manner. And if that's not the act of a friend, I don't know what is.
Our guest is a student of Soviet history. He studied the Soviet Union as a student at Franklin and Marshall College, a Marine Corps veteran, former intelligence officer, and former UN weapons inspector. Scott Ritter is in Albany. Melissa is joining us from Hartford, Connecticut. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Scott, it's good to see you again. I hope we see more of you. I have a comment and a question. I think that it's time to replace Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. I always suspected that she would eventually try to sabotage President Obama. But I do not believe that the Iranians are so suicidal that they would attack Israel. But the Israelis have a long history of provoking their opposition into a fight. So my question is, if Israel did attack Iran, even while negotiations were in process, would the United States be forced to support Israel militarily? And in doing so, would the United States be at risk of another 9/11 attack?
Well, I don't know about 9/11. 9/11 was perpetrated by the forces of a Sunni Islamic fundamentalist, Al-Qaeda. Iran is a Shia state that has a completely different history. The Wahhabist-based Sunni fundamentalism is so far removed from the deliberate tradition of the Shia faith as to make a comparison between what motivates each side to act, sort of fruitless. Look, the bottom line is Israel does not have the military means to initiate and sustain a conventional military strike against Iran that would be meaningful. Israel has finite military resources, not infinite. They had trouble, applying air power to beat down Hezbollah in 2006 when Hezbollah was right at their borders. Now we're talking about a very complex mission that would require them to overfly states that are not friendly to Israel. Saudi Arabia, there's been talk in the press about whether or not Saudi Arabia has agreed to an overflight. Saudi Arabia has denied this. Iraq, would the United States allow a corridor going through Iraq, knowing that it would totally undermine the stability of the Iraqi government? Syria is not going to allow it. And then to sustain it, Iran's a huge country. How do you get hundreds of aircraft operating 24/7 over Iranian airspace? Israel is not the United States. We are the only nation in the world that's capable of initiating and sustaining a meaningful military airstrike against Iran, and we're not going to do it. The events that just took place last week have totally knocked the pillars out from underneath any drive for an American military strike against Iran. The Israelis are scared to death that the United States is going to reach some sort of diplomatic agreement with the world and Iran on its nuclear program, and you see a lot of bluster coming out of Israel right now. A former defense official said if strict sanctions aren't imposed by December of this year, Israel will have no choice but to strike. Israel will not strike, and I don't believe the Obama administration is going to let them strike. Israel knows that a military strike void of American support will get nowhere, and any effort by Israel to drag the United States into a military conflict with Iran by bombing at a time when diplomacy is succeeding is a suicide pill, not for Iran, but for Israel. And no matter how radical the current Israeli government is, they're not that radical. I think at the end of the day, you're going to see Israel making a lot of bluster, trying to put political pressure on the Obama administration to keep Iran honest, and in the end, Israel's going to back down.
You call it bluster, but when you have the Iranian president denying that there was a Holocaust or saying that it was a fabrication and saying that Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map, does Israel not have the right to defend itself?
Well, every nation in the world has a right to defend itself. There's an inherent right to self-defense that's built into this Charter of the United Nations. But we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. First of all, the Iranian president has not denied the Holocaust. He simply has asked questions. I'm not condoning his point of view, but his questions tend to revolve around the issue of 6 million Jews were annihilated in the Holocaust, but tens of millions of other people died. Why is it that we're not focused on the other deaths? We're just focused on 6 million that led to the creation of Israeli state in the Middle East. It had nothing to do with the deaths of the 6 million. I think that's the basis of his argument. Again, I'm not condoning it, but there's a far cry between what the Iranian president is saying and what the media has accused him of saying. It's just, he has not denied the Holocaust. He's simply trying to question the application of the Holocaust in the modern situation in the Middle East. He likewise didn't say that he wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. He doesn't get to make that call. I'd advise people to read the Constitution of Iran. It's available in the English language. It's clear who does get to make that call, and it's the supreme leader who controls the military, controls national security policy, controls foreign policy. What Ahmadinejad did was quote the former supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, when he said, if Israel refuses to learn the lessons of history when it comes to the issue of the Palestinian people and a Palestinian state, then history will eliminate the lines of Israel from the map of the earth. That's a far cry from saying that it is the policy of Iran to eliminate Israel. Iran has no such policy, and we need to be clear about that. Is Iran the best friend Israel ever had? Not even close. But is Iran a state openly hostile to Israel, preparing to launch an attack against Israel? No, not at all. Israel is the only nation in the Middle East right now that's talking about preemptive military action. Israel has indicated not only its willingness to consider it, but its ability to execute it with similar preemptive actions in southern Lebanon and against Gaza. And now they're making similar noises against Iran. I think we need to be careful here. We don't need to lionize the Iranian president, but we certainly don't need to demonize him either. We need to put his words and his actions in a proper perspective so that we can come up with a sane policy direction about Iran.
Joe is next from Boston for Scott Ritter. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Good morning, Mr. Ritter. And thank you for your time in the media to counter which seems to be a tsunami of propaganda against the Iranians specifically and the Muslim world in general. I was curious and intrigued by your comment earlier about the laptop computer, which was the basis of the report that came out in the New York Times this morning. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that, where the laptop came from and why the information on that is suspect in your opinion.
Well, certainly. Look, first of all, we need to be clear. I don't work for the United States intelligence community anymore, and I certainly wasn't part of it at a time when this laptop computer emerged as a piece of evidence. So I'm as much a prisoner of available data as the rest of the Americans, of the listeners out there. But I will say this. When the laptop first showed up, it was presented in one way. They said this is a laptop that's derived from Iranian sources. So the implication was it was a laptop where actual work took place. And I was extraordinarily skeptical of this because I said if that's the case, then you have all the forensic ability available built into that laptop to prove the information or disprove the information. What it turns out is that's not the case. It's an American laptop. The CIA owns it. And the data that's inserted on the laptop came from, allegedly, Iranian sources who gathered this data over the course of several years and then smuggled it out to the Germans, who then turned it over to the CIA, who then reassembled this data in this laptop computer and presented it to the IAEA. What needs to be pointed out is this laptop does not have a direct line to the Iranians. In fact, there's every reason to believe that none of the information on the laptop actually ever came from Iran, or at least the Iranian government. This laptop has disinformation written all over it. There's reports that say that there's a lot of testing data on this laptop, and it'd be very difficult to fabricate that testing data. Really now. Israel has a nuclear weapons program, and in the process of building these nuclear weapons, Israel carried out any number of tests that derived testing data that could be extracted, manipulated, repackaged, and transferred to the IAEA, calling it Iranian data. The same thing with the United States. We have testing data that dates back to the 1950s that could be repackaged. I'm not saying this is what happened, but I'd say that there's a heck of a lot more chance of this data being fabricated by nations openly hostile to Iran than it is coming from Iran. There's no evidence. Once you remove this data, there's no other supporting evidence out there to reinforce this. It's not as though there's a whole lot of smoke and this is just one more piece of smoke that says there's a fire burning in Iran. If you remove this smoke that comes from this laptop, there's nothing there, which again raises a lot of questions. I don't believe in the magic source. The last time we had a magic source was when Colin Powell went before the Security Council and used a source called Curveball